Hello, welcome to episode 18 of the Epic Film Challenge to 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die. It is the first documentary of the series, Aileen Wuornos, The Selling of a Serial Killer, from 1992, directed by Nick Broomfield, who is a British documentary maker. And before I even get into the film itself, I need to kind of tell you my experience with it and beyond. About a week ago, I watched this film and was hooked by it. I was utterly gripped. And then I looked into it and realized that Nick Broomfield had made a follow-up documentary, which is on Netflix, called Aileen, The Life and Death of a Serial Killer. So I watched that the day afterwards. Now, the book, 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die, is a very popular book. Every year it's reprinted with new films from the previous year. So for example, I have the 2012 edition. It has every film up to 2011. So there'll be a new one this year in 2016 that goes up to 2015. Now the current version of the book that goes up to the year 2014 has the film Aileen, The Life and Death of a Serial Killer from 2002, I believe. But it doesn't have the one that's in my version of the book from 1992. So the original documentary is in the book I have. It ain't in the current version. But the sequel is in the current version, and the original isn't in the one I've got, if that makes sense. But I watched both of them, and I'm already toying with the idea, you know, if I get to 1001 of these videos and I don't completely hate it by then, I might want to then go and watch the other 160 odd films that have been a part of the books over the years, because obviously they put new films in, they take new films out. I'll take old films out, sorry. But I'm going to talk about the sequel as well in this video. I've already filmed this before, but I went too much into my thoughts on Aileen Wuornos and what she did, and then I went on this whole tangent about the history of how bad people have been breeded throughout, you know, forever, basically. Like, where did it start? Where did the first bad thing happen to lead us to this point where there are people who, you know, they don't see the world like we do. They you know, for me personally, I can't fathom killing another person. The idea of hurting another person is unsettling to me, you know, but to other people it isn't. And would I feel differently if I'd been through a lifetime or a childhood and upbringing of terror and trauma? I don't know. I can't answer that question. Anyway, that was the gist of all the stuff I went in when I filmed this video before. So that's out of the way. I don't need to kind of expound on that for far too long and just sound like an idiot. But the films themselves, or we're going to talk about the film that's in the book that I have, that I've been sticking to for these past 3 years. Aileen Wuornos, The Selling of a Serial Killer. Aileen Wuornos is a woman who, in the late 80s, killed a number of men on the road. She was a hitchhiking prostitute. She had a terrible upbringing, became a prostitute in her young teens, gave birth to a child in her young teens. I believe that was conceived of through abuse as well. Lived rough, you know, had a terrible life up until that point. And yeah, she basically killed a bunch of men who she claims were trying to rape her. When she, you know, had met them for, you know, as a prostitute, and that is what she claimed. She got arrested eventually and sentenced and given multiple death sentences. And the film, The Selling of a Serial Killer, follows the British filmmaker Nick Broomfield over to Florida, where he is attempting to speak to Aileen. Now, people say Aileen, Eileen. I'll just say Aileen for now. Her nickname was Lee. But the film is almost the making of the film inside the film itself, because you see Nick Broomfield throughout with his little recording box, the microphone and his headset, and he's going around speaking to people. He goes to the bar where she was arrested. He speaks to people who were close to her in her life at that point in 1992. And those two people are kind of the key figures of the film. One is a woman named Arlene, I believe. I might actually have gotten that wrong. But anyway, there's this woman who legally adopted Aileen while she was in prison. She'd never known Aileen before she was arrested for these murders. She saw in her eyes in the press that she thought that woman has innocent eyes, and she kind of spoke to God and got the message that she needs to help this woman. So you have this weird thing where a woman who doesn't look too much older than Aileen, maybe not by more than about 10 years, adopting her legally, becoming her friend, and it's a weird situation. And then you have this guy who's a lawyer, who is Aileen's lawyer, and you see one of his like commercials. He's called Dr. Legal. I mean, it just seems like something straight out of Saul Goodman, you know. And the first time we're introduced to him, he's lounging around in this white shirt. You know, he's a big fellow, and he's got a big beard and hair and stuff. And he doesn't fit your image of a lawyer. Yet he is one, and throughout the film, he plays songs for Nick and his camera crew, and it's a very strange film. I quite like the lawyer guy, but I don't know, there was something about him that was just captivating and not in the best way. And you see, you know, for me, I thought this was going to be a profile on this woman, Aileen Wuornos, the men that she'd killed, being named America's first female serial killer, and all the hoopla that went around that. It was a huge, you know, sensational news story. But it's more about Nick trying to get to speak to Aileen, to talk to her, and also him following these two people who are connected to her, and seem to be acting in her best interest, but are they really? Because there's money involved, and you see conversations with these two people and Nick Broomfield, the director and the maker of this film, about money and how much they're going to get paid for appearing in this documentary, how much Aileen's going to get paid for this interview that Nick wants to conduct with her. And it blows my mind. Like, there's some scenes in it that I just couldn't believe. Like, is this a real person? You know, who's like, the lawyer is talking about, oh, well, you know, she was saying how, you know, would you pay, when are you going to pay me and stuff like that. It doesn't really, when are you're going to pay me? Like, he's putting forward this idea of payment, and finally you see him handing over these $100 bills to this lawyer, and he's got this big grin on his face, and he's joking around about it and stuff. And you're talking about a woman who's on death row, and it just felt so unreal, you know. This film is, it's captivating, and perhaps not in the best way, but nonetheless, I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. And it's all building up to Nick finally speaking to Aileen at the end of the film, and when she walks through that door with the smile on her face, like, "Hey Nick, how's it going?" Like, as if nothing's wrong. It's mental, because you then think, well, yeah, if you're on death row, you know, at some point you are probably going to just try and act like everything's normal. Why wouldn't you? You know, it would suffocate you to succumb to the dread of that all the time. But you don't really think about those things. And for me, it was one of those moments where, you know, if you look into the life of a serial killer, or someone who's done something terrible, or someone who's larger than life, you kind of imagine what would it be like to just sit down in a room with someone like that and just talk to them person to person. And in this film you get that. I almost felt like I was Nick Broomfield when that door opened and she walked into the room to speak to him. It's like, holy shit, we're gonna actually get to see and hear the way that she acts and talks and interacts with people. You know, with these serial killer cases, you often just get the black and white photo of someone like that, and the creepy music and stuff, and he killed 4 men. This, you get to see her live and in living colour right in front of you, and just the way that she is. And that to me was just edge my seat stuff, because it was building up to it. You know, Nick had gone to the prison multiple times to speak to her. Oh, she doesn't want to speak to you now. Finally he gets it, and you get this tiny, you know, infinitesimal insight into who she was. You know, and not even that maybe, but you just get to see her talking to him. And the whole idea of, was it self-defense? You know, she claims that it was self-defense, the men that were trying to rape her when she killed them with a gun. And she goes into great detail about how she was raped, and you get to see some of those trial recordings. It paints a really weird picture, but it is unlike anything I've seen. You know, I mean, I've seen the big Netflix series Making a Murderer, and that is a whole other video. But I mean, this is just its own thing that just, I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. It's one of the best documentaries I've ever seen. And is an important film to see, I think. To see this is what can happen to people, you know, when it comes to the greed of a situation. I never really thought about it like that. You know, the book deals and all that, the money that people were trying to make off of her story of being this serial killer. It's crazy. And then it also delves into the side that the cops were trying to profit off of this. They were trying to sell her story to Hollywood. You know, and she insists that they were doing that before she was even arrested. That's her big thing. You don't know who to quite believe in some of these cases, but he speaks to an ex-cop, or at least a cop who was demoted, I believe, who wouldn't go along with this selling of her story. And so he was threatened. His family was threatened. It's scary shit. And there's a harrowing scene where Nick is led through into the electrocution chamber to see the electric chair and the clinical clear window with the people who sit there and watch as this person gets electrocuted alive in front of them. And he goes through all the steps very just, through the procedure, just kind of blow by blow. We shave their head, we shave a spot on their leg, we put the electrode here, this guy over here is going to pull the lever, there's a phone there in case there's any last minute changes. They get to say what they want, and then this is what their body will look like when they're dying. And I was just like, because you never, electric chair, I just think of like The Simpsons or something, or, I guess The Green Mile comes to mind, but you actually see it right there. It makes it so immediate to me, even though that this is a film that feels not dated, but you can tell it's from the 90s by the way that it's shot and the way that it looks and the way that everyone is, looks, but still, it felt very immediate and scary. And for me, is it a film you must see before you die? Absolutely. Go out of your way to watch this, because it might be a tough watch, but it is something that just you have to see. Now the sequel, Aileen, The Life and Death of a Serial Killer, was filmed 10 years later when Nick was actually summoned over to Florida to appear at a trial because of his film, the first film. They show clips of it in the courtroom, and when you watch the sequel straight away, there is a bit of bleed over. There's about 10 minutes worth of footage from the first film that's brought over. And in this second film, Nick gets a lot more access to Aileen. He speaks to her a lot more. And it is some of the most scary stuff I think I've ever seen. Connie was watching a bit of it next to me and she was like, she is terrifying. Now, I mean, you could argue that Aileen at this point had been in prison for 10 years and would probably, any kind of lapse in sanity that she might have had at the point that she was killing these men and sentenced to death had been completely exacerbated by the point that she'd been in jail for 10 years. There's no way that she gets better being in jail for 10 years. So you're looking, I mean, literally into the eyes of madness, and it is, you don't want to look away, but you want to look away. It's really, it's so much bigger than the first film in terms of just like heart in your chest stuff. My heart was pounding during that last interview that Nick conducted with Aileen. And he delves more into her story in the second film and where she came from, the things that she went through, people that she grew up with. He speaks to one of her friends from when she was a kid. He speaks to her biological mother. And when he tells Aileen that he spoke to her biological mother in the last interview he conducted with her, literally less than 24 hours before she was executed, and her reaction, heart-pounding stuff. It really is. The sequel is the better film because it tells a more complete story of her life, I think, and you get to hear more from her and all the things that she thinks, as crazy as they are. You get more insight, I think, into Nick's feeling on it and his relationship with Aileen and how that has evolved, and how Nick truly believed that she had acted out of self-defense, but that is completely questioned in the second film, and the story changes. And you get kind of stuff from the first film as well, so I feel like the sequel is a much better, fuller experience of the Aileen Wuornos story as told through Nick Broomfield's perspective, but I still think the first one is a must-see film. If you can see both, but if you have to see one, see the second one, The Life and Death of a Serial Killer. But I still think there is something to be had with the selling of a serial killer, which I'm reviewing in this video, that is just unlike anything I've seen in a documentary, and just not what you'd expect either. When he delves into that side of the profiteering that goes into a high-profile case and person like Aileen Wuornos. And overall, I just feel sad about the whole thing, because she seemed like there was faint glimmers of a decent person that I could see in Aileen, just very vaguely, but and people called her a monster, and it's hard to argue with that when you see her and the way that she acts. I mean, in the first film, you see the moment when she is dealt with a death sentence. And before that moment, she is saying, I'm ready to die. I'm ready to, I still say it was self-defense, but I'm willing to accept the consequences of my actions. And if that is death, then so be it. And I'm at peace with that. The judge rules that she'll be sentenced to death. and she looks over to someone with pure venom in her eyes, and she says, "I hope you and your children get raped in the ass." And she said, like, there is fire in her eyes, her teeth are gritted, and it is just like, how can you not see anything but a monster in that face? But from what I have seen from these 3 hours of these two films is an absolute kind of understanding of how she got to be that person. And that doesn't by any way excuse anything she did. It doesn't let her off the hook, but you can't help but look at her upbringing and her childhood and the horrors that she went through, and kind of maybe begin to understand how someone could turn into someone like Aileen Wuornos, and that is sad, you know. So there you go. I feel like this was a bit of a better video than I made before, but not by that much. So let me know your thoughts on it if you've seen it. And if you haven't, definitely check it out. Well, check out both of them. I mean, the sequel's on Netflix, so just go to that one if you want to. But I think there's a lot to be seen in this. The first one, the selling of a serial killer, very interesting story. It is definitely a film you must see before you die. As is the sequel. See both of them. And I'll see you in the next video.